we will be covering the tragic crimes that happened to these people. I ask of you to please read the description for the disclaimer or content warning in case there's anything that we will be talking about that you don't want to see or hear. I'm reading a comment, by the way. Where is your model? There is an issue with my model, unfortunately. Even though my face is neutral, emotions get triggered. It would suddenly be surprised or show anger. I'm still trying to fix that. Thank you for asking. But once I do, we're going to start using it again. I'm going to be covering this in a soft-speaking manner. Maybe whispers here and there, but mostly like this. The first case that I will be talking about is the case of Drybrough and Nadia Kajouji. The rise of the internet in the early 2000s connected people in ways that were once unimaginable. For many, these online forums and chat rooms became places of comfort, communities where people could seek advice, share struggles, or simply not feel alone. But this new form of connection also carried dangers. Anonymous communication made it possible for individuals to hide behind false identities, and in some cases, exploit the most vulnerable. Two tragedies, the deaths of Drybrough in 2005 and Nadia Kajouji in 2008, brought this issue into sharp focus. Their stories became central to one of the most unusual and influential legal cases in the history of internet crime. The prosecution of William Francis Malgrat Tinkle, a former nurse from Minnesota who encouraged people struggling with mental health to end their lives. Their cases forced courts to wrestle with difficult questions, such as what are the limits of free speech, and what counts as assisting suicide online, and how do we handle crimes that cross international borders in a digital world. I just realized that I was using the wrong background from the start. I apologize. That's not gonna happen again. Okay, let's move on. for the story of Mark Drybrough. Mark Drybrough was born in 1976 in Coventry, England. By all accounts, he was a bright, intelligent man. Friends and family described him as thoughtful, kind, and deeply curious about the world. But alongside his intellect, Mark carried the heavy weight of depression. By his early 30s, he had been struggling with mental health challenges for years. Like many seeking understanding in an era when mental health was still stigmatized, Mark turned to the internet for support. In online forums, he hoped to find others who could relate. People who might understand the pain he had to live with daily. In 2005, Mark came into contact with a person who claimed to be a compassionate, middle-aged woman working as a nurse. She seemed understanding. She spoke about depression as though she knew it intimately. She listened to him in long chats and presented herself as supportive. But what Mark could not know was that this woman was in fact William Dingle, a 46-year-old former nurse in Minnesota, USA. Using false online identities, he preyed on vulnerable individuals around the world, especially those expressing suicidal thoughts. Instead of offering help, he encouraged despair. He suggested methods. He normalized death as a solution. And in some cases, he even asked to watch via webcam. On July 27, 2005, after weeks of harmful online contact, Mark Drybrough died by suicide in his home. He was only 32 years old. His death devastated his family. But at the time, they could not imagine how many others were being targeted by the same individual. Another victim, Nadia Kajouji, was born in 1988, Brampton, Ontario, Canada. She was known as a bright and outgoing young woman, someone who loved poetry, skating, and performing arts. At 18, she enrolled in her first year at Galton University in Ottawa, studying public affairs and policy management. But beneath with her friendly personality, Nadia was struggling. Like many students facing the transition to university life, Nadia felt isolated and overwhelmed. In early 2008, her mental health worsened. She confided to some that she was depressed and lonely. Seeking support, she too turned to online forums. There, she met someone she believed was a sympathetic woman in her 30s. A nurse who said she understood what Nadia was going through. This friend promised comfort, understanding, and guidance. But again, it was William Tinkle behind the screen. Instead of helping her find reasons to live, he described suicide as a solution. He encouraged her to spare and detail methods, exploiting her trust at a time when she was most vulnerable. On March 9, 2008, Nadia went missing. Her family and friends launched desperate searches across Ottawa. 6 weeks later, in April 20, her body was discovered in a river. She had died by suicide. She was only 18 years old. The tragedy of her death shocked her university community and sparked public conversation about the mental health struggles of young people and the dangers of anonymous online interactions. Now, who is William Tinkle? Who is this man behind the screen? William Tinkle was indeed a licensed nurse from Drybrough, Minnesota. Outwardly, he lived an ordinary suburban life, but in secret, he spent hours online, lurking the chat rooms where vulnerable people gathered, using false names and identities, often posing as a kind woman nurse. He sought out individuals talking about suicide. Investigators later learned that he contacted dozens of people around the world, men, women, and teenagers alike. He would pretend to empathize with their struggles, encourage them to view suicide as an acceptable choice, provide detailed instructions on methods, urged them to use webcams so he could watch. In his own words, he admitted to having a fascination with suicide and to feeling a sense of power from these interactions. Police investigations eventually linked him to at least 5 deaths, including Nadia and Mark. In 2009, after years of investigation, William was charged in Minnesota with aiding suicide in the deaths of Drybrough and Kajouji. The first trial happened in 2011. He was convicted on 2 counts of aiding suicide. His sentence, 360 days in jail, served in intervals so I could keep working, and 15 years of probation. Many felt this punishment was far too light, given the gravity of the harm. William appealed his conviction, and the case made its way to the Minnesota Supreme Court. His defense argued that his online words were protected speech under the U.S. First Amendment. In 2014, the Minnesota Supreme Court made a landmark ruling, encouraging or advising suicide was ruled as protected free speech. Assisting or enabling suicide, however, such as giving instructions or persuading, was not protected. This distinction was critical. It meant prosecutors had to prove that his words directly assisted the deaths. The final outcome is that the conviction related to Mark Drybrough was upheld. The conviction related to Nadia Kajouji was overturned on jurisdictional grounds because her death occurred in Canada, and the court ruled Minnesota law could not extend there. William was re-sentenced to nearly 6 years in prison, but served a shorter term before release. The lives of Mark Drybrough and Nadia Kajouji ended far too soon. Both were intelligent, kind, and deeply human. People who reached out in vulnerable moments, looking for comfort and understanding. Instead, they encountered someone who exploited their pain of the risk hidden within anonymous online spaces. But they also left lasting legacies, legal precedents, awareness campaigns, and conversations about how we protect the most vulnerable in the digital age. Though their stories are painful, they are remembered with respect, and the lessons from their cases continue to influence how we balance free speech, online safety, and mental health support in the modern world. I'll be moving on to the case of Michelle Hadley. In 2016, Michelle Hadley, a young professional living in California, found herself at the center of a sensational and deeply troubling case. At first, she was portrayed as a dangerous stalker who allegedly terrorized another woman through harassing emails and so-called rape fantasies. Her arrest made national headlines, and she was described as someone capable of extreme cruelty. But as the truth emerged, it became clear that Hadley herself was the victim of an elaborate setup. What followed was a remarkable reversal. Her release, her full exoneration, and the eventual prosecution of the real perpetrator. The case highlighted the dangers of online deception, the risk of rushing to judgment, and the flaws within both media and law enforcement processes. Michelle Hadley was engaged to Ian Diaz, a U.S. Marshal, in the mid-2010s. The relationship eventually ended, but it was not amicable. After their breakup, Diaz began a relationship with another woman, Angela Diaz, whom he later married. In 2016, Angela Diaz claimed she was a victim of a disturbing cyber stalking campaign. She alleged that Michelle Hadley was the one sending her harassing emails, making threats, and posting online ads that invited strangers to her home to fulfill violent sexual fantasies. These claims, shocking in nature, immediately drew attention. Angela Diaz told authorities that she received threatening and explicit emails that appeared to come from Hadley. Craigslist ads had been placed in Hadley's name, inviting men to participate in rape fantasies, supposedly with Angela as the unwilling participant. Several men actually showed up at the Diaz home in Anaheim, California, believing they were acting out consensual fantasies. Angela Diaz portrayed herself as a terrified victim. She appeared visibly distressed in interviews and spoke emotionally about her ordeal. Police investigated and quickly arrested Michelle Hadley, presenting her as a stalker motivated by jealousy and anger toward her ex-fiancé and his new wife. Hadley was arrested in July 2016 and initially charged with 4 main crimes: stalking, making criminal threats, attempted forcible rape, and other related offenses. The accusations painted her as both obsessive and dangerous. Media coverage amplified these claims, and her reputation was destroyed almost overnight. She spent 3 months in jail before being released on bail. During this time, she consistently maintained her innocence. As investigators dug deeper, they began to notice irregularities. The supposed emails from Hadley did not align with her online activity. Forensic examination revealed that Angela Diaz herself had created many of the threatening messages. Evidence showed that Angela Diaz used VPNs and anonymous online tools to mask her identity. Second, she sent threatening emails to herself while making them appear to come from Hadley. She was the one who created fake online accounts in Hadley's name to post the Craigslist ads. And she orchestrated the entire campaign in order to frame Hadley. Angela Diaz even went so far as to bruise herself and claim that she had been assaulted, further supporting her false story. By late 2016, prosecutors realized Michelle Hadley had been sent off. In January 2017, the Orange County District Attorney's Office announced that all charges against Michelle Hadley were being dropped. District Attorney Tony Rokakas publicly declared that she was innocent and had been the victim of one of the most elaborate false accusation cases we have ever seen. Hadley was fully exonerated. However, her time in jail, the damage to her reputation, and the emotional toll had lasting effects. Angela Diaz was then arrested and charged with multiple counts of kidnapping, false imprisonment, perjury, false reporting of a crime, and other charges related to the scheme. In 2017, she pleaded guilty to 10 felony charges, including kidnapping and false imprisonment. She was sentenced to 5 years in prison. Michelle Hadley's case is remembered as one of the most extraordinary examples of a wrongful accusation in the digital era. Initially portrayed as a dangerous stalker, she endured jail time, public shame, and lasting trauma, only to be revealed as the true victim of a calculated and malicious scheme. Her full exoneration brought relief, but the damage could not be undone. Meanwhile, Angela Diaz's conviction provided some accountability, but also underscored the lengths to which manipulation and deceit can go undetected. The case continues to serve as a reminder of the importance of skepticism, rigorous investigation, and fairness in both legal proceedings and public opinion. Before I continue, I have to say something. Lately, my lips have been very dry, and I have a problem with peeling them. I just peeled my upper lip, and it's now bleeding a little bit too heavily. I don't like the taste of blood, so I I should probably stop this habit. But the feeling of my lips brushing onto my mic and causing this sort of rough sound is not very pleasing to my ears. But now I'm suffering the consequences. Alright, let's move on to the story of Amy Allwine. In 2016, the small city of Cottage Grove, Minnesota, became the setting of a shocking crime that blended elements of darknet crime, cyber harassment, and domestic murder. The victim was Amy Allwine, a respected businesswoman, dog trainer, wife, and mother. Her death revealed a chilling story of betrayal, manipulation, and violence. One that began online and ended inside her own home. The case not only devastated her family and community, but also raised awareness about the dangers of hidden corners of the internet and the warning signs of domestic violence. Now, who was Amy Allwine? Amy Louise Zutz Allwine was born in 1972. She grew up in Minnesota, where she became known as intelligent, compassionate, and driven. She married Stephen Carl Allwine, and together they built a life in Cottage Grove, raising a son. Amy was a highly respected dog trainer, specializing in obedience and agility. She ran Allwine Poodles, a successful dog training and breeding business. Within her community, she was admired as a devoted mother, business owner, and active church member. By all appearances, Amy's life seemed steady and full. But in 2016, everything unraveled. In 2016, unknown to Amy, her name appeared on dark websites. Hidden parts of the internet accessible only through special software like Tor. On a site known as Pesa Mafia, which claimed to connect clients with hitmen, someone had placed orders to have Amy killed. These orders included disturbing levels of detail. Her name, address, daily routine, and even her dog's barking habits. later discovered that these orders were placed not by a stranger, but by her husband, Stephen Allwine. He paid thousands of dollars in Bitcoin in repeated attempts to have her murdered. When those attempts failed, he turned to a more direct and personal method. On November 13, 2016, emergency responders were called to the Allwine home. Amy, age 43, was found dead in her bedroom with a fatal gunshot wound to the head. At first glance, the scene was staged to resemble a suicide, but forensic evidence quickly raised suspicions. Hello, Warren. Welcome. The wound, I'm so sorry by the way, not just to you guys, but to everyone who will watch this after the stream. Usually the construction ends at 3 p.m. or 4 p.m, but it seems that they're ending quite late today. So if you can hear any construction noises, I just have to apologize. Later, I'm going to be doing another true crime reading. And since it will be nighttime, hopefully it will be quieter. For now, just think of this as a trial run. Let's go back to my rumor. Forensic evidence quickly raised suspicions. The wound location and angle did not match a typical suicide. Number 2, there were no gunshot residue patterns on Amy's hands, and traces of scopolamine, a sedative sometimes called a zombie drug, were found in her system. Her husband Stephen claimed Amy had been struggling with depression, but investigators uncovered a different story. Authorities discovered that Stephen had been active on darknet forums under the alias Dog Day God. He had repeatedly attempted to hire a hitman through Pesa Mafia, leaving behind digital trails despite the website's supposed anonymity. Payments traced through Bitcoin transactions showed thousands of dollars spent in attempts to orchestrate Amy's murder. When these failed, Stephen allegedly poisoned Amy's food and drink with sedatives. Finally, he shot her with a handgun and staged the scene as a suicide. In 2017, Stephen Allwine was arrested and charged with first-degree premeditated murder. The trial revealed shocking evidence. First, extensive communications with darknet websites. Second, detailed instructions he provided to supposed linking his devices to the murder for hire plots. And fourth, the presence of sedatives in Amy's system. Prosecutors argued that Stephen wanted Amy dead because he was engaged in multiple extramarital affairs and sought to leave the marriage without his reputation getting tarnished within the conservative church community. The jury deliberated for less than a day. Stephen Allwine was convicted to first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without parole. Amy Allwine was more than the victim of a crime. She was a wife, a mother, a successful businesswoman, and a beloved member of her community. Her life was ended not by chance, but by the deliberate actions of someone she trusted most. Her case serves as a stark warning about the dark possibilities of online anonymity and the devastating consequences of betrayal within intimate relationships. At the same time, her story has left a legacy, advancing cybercrime investigations, highlighting the dangers of the dark net, and raising awareness about hidden forms of domestic violence. Amy's name remains remembered with compassion and respect, not for the way her life ended, but for the person she was, and for the lessons her story continues to teach the world. For our last story, we'll be moving on to Operation Cathedral. By the mid-1990s, law enforcement agencies around the world were only beginning to understand the new challenges posed by the internet. While it opened up unprecedented opportunities for communication and information sharing, it also provided anonymity that criminals could exploit. One of the earliest and most disturbing discoveries in this period was the existence of online networks dedicated to child exploitation. What began as an investigation into a smaller group known as the Orchid Club eventually led to the uncovering of the Wonderland Club, a global online ring. The international operation to dismantle it became known as Operation Cathedral, a landmark case in the history of cybercrime investigations. The Orchid Club came to police attention in the mid-1990s. Members of this group used online chat rooms to create, distribute, and trade child exploitation material. Several arrests were made in the United States, and authorities believe they had disrupted a dangerous but contained group. However, forensic examination of seized materials revealed links to a far larger, better organized network. Investigators soon realized that the Orchid Club was only the beginning. The wider investigation led to the discovery of the Wonderland Club, an international child exploitation ring that operated primarily through the early internet. Members spanned multiple countries using encryption, coded language, and anonymity to communicate and share illegal material. The network was highly secretive. Membership required providing illegal material to gain entry, which ensured a constant flow of new content and increased difficulty for law enforcement to infiltrate. The sheer scale and coordination of the group shocked investigators. Recognizing the scope of the problem, the UK's National Crime Squad launched a coordinated global operation known as Operation Cathedral. The operation quickly expanded to involve police forces and agencies in 13 countries, including the United States, Canada, Australia, and multiple European nations. Digital forensics at the time was still developing, and investigators were effectively pioneering new methods to trace online activity, follow digital evidence, and coordinate raids across borders. The urgency was not only about arresting offenders, but also about identifying and safeguarding children at risk. In September 1998, law enforcement coordinated simultaneous raids in multiple countries. More than 100 suspects were arrested worldwide, many of whom were found in possession of extensive illegal material. Evidence seized during these raids directly led to the identification of child victims, some of whom were rescued from ongoing abuse. Several offenders faced trial and received lengthy prison sentences. Operation Cathedral marked a turning point in cybercrime enforcement by dismantling the Wonderland Club. Authorities demonstrated that even the darkest corners of the internet were not beyond reach. The case not only resulted in arrests and convictions, but also saved victims from further harm and reshaped the way governments and agencies understood online crime. It remains a significant milestone in the history of international law enforcement and a reminder of the constant need to adapt legal and investigative frameworks to the evolving digital world. I'm going to be ending the stream here. Thank you so much to everyone who dropped by, especially mentioning Ethan and Warren. I'm not going to do any more live streams today. Or maybe I am, I don't know. But I'll mainly be just publishing videos. And it would make me really happy if I could see you guys comment. Thank you for listening. And I hope that the souls of the victims in these stories and their families have found peace and healing. All due respect to them. Once again.